Good evening, everyone. I think we are live. I'm just waiting for a few people to come and enter the session. Welcome. Happy King's Day. It's King's Day today in the Netherlands. And obviously, we're also celebrating that here in the UK. Thank you for joining this online session for Dutch nationals in the UK about securing your EU rights after the UK has left the EU. Yeah, that's correct. In other words, if you settled in the UK before 2020, the end of 2020, what do you need to do to keep your EU rights that you had when you settled here? The EU and the UK have made comprehensive agreements about citizens' rights, but you do, as an individual citizen, have to do something to make sure that you get those rights, and that's what this session is about. It might feel a bit strange to have an online session again after years of COVID, and we can finally, there's no more restrictions. We can finally have normal sessions with people coming together. However, we have noticed in the past few years that it actually works quite well to reach a large group of people all over the UK by organizing these online sessions. So that's why we continue to do that. My name is Koen Guiking. I work for the Dutch Embassy in the UK, and I'm the moderator for this evening. I'm mainly the moderator because the people that actually know their stuff are all behind the scenes and will be talking to you later today. So I'm the least informed person of the whole team that is organizing this event tonight. The 6 people that are involved in this whole event behind the scenes are Louise Velter, who's put it all together basically, Hannah Lassery, who's doing the technicalities and the technology to make sure we broadcast this and live stream it on Zoom, Facebook, and get a recording on YouTube afterwards, and Trudy Barnes. And Trudy and Louise are also answering questions in the Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box or via Facebook or via Zoom, and they will get back to you. So I don't think that we'll have time to actually get to those questions with the 3 speakers that we have lined up for tonight, because there are already quite a few questions that have come in, but we will get back to you in the Q&A. So to the 3 speakers of the evening, we have the Dutch ambassador to the UK, Karel van Oostrom. We have the head of the consular department at the Dutch Embassy, Marije Lamaker. And we have immigration lawyer Chris Ben from Serafis Solicitor. So first, I would like to ask Karel van Oostrom, the ambassador, to officially open the evening.
Thank you very much, Koen, and welcome to you all to this virtual information session on the occasion of this special day, King's Day in the Netherlands. And first, let me wish all of you a happy King's Day. And if you allow me, I'll say a few words in Dutch. Echt allemaal van harte gefeliciteerd met de verjaardag van koning Willem-Alexander. En het was fantastisch om te zien vandaag in Nederland. En ik denk dat jullie allemaal even op de website hebben geklikt om te zien Nederland weer bij elkaar na COVID en dan zo'n feestelijke gebeurtenis. So we have a very special day in the Netherlands, King's Day, and we continue this session in English, first and foremost, because some of our audience only speaks English, but also because Chris, our lawyer, is English, and some of the substance matter really is connected to the UK. Looking at today at the Netherlands and our celebration of King's Day, I was struck that our king also expressed sympathy with the people of the Ukraine, and while celebrating, but also making sure that so close to our home, people are fighting for their liberty and their safety. And it also struck me that there were many Dutch people, and in the Netherlands we have a traditional vrijmarkt, an open space where people can sell their stuff or organize nice events. It struck me that so many Dutch people promised they would give the proceeds to the people of the Ukraine. In the Netherlands, we celebrate King's Day today. Here in London, we will be celebrating it coming Saturday, the 30th of April, from about 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock at the Dutch church in the middle of the city. And if you have not yet seen where it is, go to our Facebook page or to our Twitter account, and you can see what the festivities are. It's really a very nice mix of Kingsday festivities. And this year, especially, there will be an auction for a very worthy purpose, the Koning Willem Fund, the benevolent fund under the patronage of Princess Beatrix, our former queen. And the proceeds of that auction will go to the King Willem Fund, and that fund makes sure that needy Dutch people in the UK, and there are many, it's one of the things which struck me, can get some kind of financial assistance when they are in troubles. So, Koen, as you explained, we're going to talk about the EU settlement scheme, where we are at the moment. There are approximately around 150,000 Dutch people in the United Kingdom. It's a city of the size of Arnhem. It's really an enormous community. And almost all of them, as far as we can see, or maybe all of them, but certainly the vast majority, have applied for settled status after Brexit. And we can see that many of them already have indeed received settled status. At the same time, because of the rules which the UK and the European Union have agreed upon, there's also a vast number of people who only have pre-settled status. Let's call it temporary status until people have lived for 5 years in the UK. Many thousands of Dutch citizens are in that pre-settled status. The key message we have today, and Chris, you're going to talk in much more detail on that one. The key message is get into action. If you have pre-settled status, you have to do something the moment that you've lived here in the UK for 5 years and change your status or upgrade it to settled status. And not only think about yourself, but also think about your fellow Dutchies here in the UK. Tell your friends, tell your family, come into action if you have pre-settled status. If you don't, you might really get into problems. That's not what we want. My last point, Koen, you already announced Marije also is with us. She'll talk about some changes in Dutch nationality law. There's already some changes which have taken place when it comes to double nationality, dual nationality, the possibility to have 2 passports. And Marije, you're going to talk about that. And maybe next year we will also be able to talk about upcoming changes, because the new government has in its own policy agreement, it's the paper which describes all the agreements between the 4 coalition parties, has indicated that further steps will be taken in that context. As an embassy, we try to be of service to the Dutch citizens. So it's my pleasure that we're organizing this today and reaching as many people as we can. And Koen, back to you. And I hope this will be informative for all our fellow Dutchies here in the UK. Mooie Koningsdag gewenst.
Thank you, Karel. Thank you very much. Yes, and indeed, the next speaker will talk a bit more about that new Dutch nationality law. That's Marije. I think, Marije, I believe you want to do the first part in Dutch, because it's quite a technical story, and then you'll switch to English later on. Marije?
Thank you, Koen. Good evening, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I will switch between English and Dutch here and there to reach out to as many as we can. Some general information on our consular section. I'm the head of the consular section at the embassy in London. For all consular services, our department is open from Monday to Friday, 8:30 in the morning till about 4 o'clock. For all consular services, it's necessary to make an appointment first. That can be done through our website. If you want to apply for a Dutch passport, a Dutch travel document, you can also apply through our external service providers, and they are located in London, in Birmingham, and Edinburgh. And for them, it's the same. If you want to make an appointment or find more information, you can find it on our website, and also the appointments can be made through our website. I will explain a little bit on the changes of the nationality law. I will do that in Dutch, because I think that's the people who you would like to explain it to need to understand at least Dutch at the moment, because it's quite complicated, but all information can be found in English as well on the website of the IND. Op 1 april 2022 is er een wijziging geweest op de Rijkswet voor het Nederlanderschap. De eerste wijziging die daar is doorgevoerd is de 13 jaar termijn. Van 10 jaar naar 13 jaar waarbij je het risico loopt om je Nederlandschap te verliezen als je een dubbele nationaliteit hebt. Het is altijd zo geweest dat als je naast de Nederlandse nationaliteit ook een andere nationaliteit bezit en je liet niet binnen 10 jaar weten dat je nog steeds prijs stelde op de Nederlandse nationaliteit, dat had je kunnen doen door bijvoorbeeld een paspoortaanvraag in te dienen of een verklaring in te dienen, dan verlies je vanaf de afgifte van je laatste paspoort binnen 10 jaar of na 10 jaar verlies je Nederlandse nationaliteit als je buiten de EU woont en nog een andere nationaliteit bezit. Deze termijn is nu opgerekt naar 13 jaar. Deze termijn dit gaat pas in vanaf 1 april 2022. Dus dat betekent dat alles wat hiervoor, zeg maar, van toepassing is geweest, dus alle mensen die al eerder op basis van deze regeling hun nationaliteit verloren hebben, kunnen dit niet met terugwerkende kracht een beroep doen op deze 13 jaar. Dat is de eerste wijziging die er in de Rijkswet op het Nederlanderschap is doorgevoerd. En er is nog een wijziging doorgevoerd, die te maken heeft met het verlies van Nederlandse nationaliteit, als dat gekoppeld is aan het verlies van het Unieburgerschap. Dus ik ben net al even kort aangehaald dat je dus automatisch de Nederlandse nationaliteit kon verliezen door het verlopen van de 10-jaartermijn. Maar je kon ook het Nederlanderschap verliezen door het vrijwillig aannemen van een andere nationaliteit onder bepaalde voorwaarden. Dat heeft tot nu toe altijd gezorgd voor verlies van Nederlanderschap. Daar is een verandering opgetreden waarbij ze zeggen dat als u automatisch het Nederlanderschap hebt verloren en daarmee het Unieburgerschap is dus het burgerschap van de Europese Unie, dan kan het zijn dat het verlies onevenredig is. En als u dat kunt aantonen, dat u daar, zeg maar dat u door verlies van de Nederlandse nationaliteit geen burger meer bent voor de Unie, dat betekent dat de andere nationaliteit die u heeft niet een Europese nationaliteit is, maar van bijvoorbeeld Amerika, Canada of in dit geval ook Engeland. En u kunt aantonen dat de gevolgen van dit verlies van Nederlanderschap gecombineerd met het Unieburgerschap zwaar weegt, kunt u met terugwerkende kracht de nationaliteit terugkrijgen. Dit is een nieuwe dus een aanpassing in de nationaliteitswetgeving. Dit betreft een aanpassing waarbij je dus als oud-Nederlander het Nederlanderschap kunt terugkrijgen. En dat gaat dan altijd inmiddels een optieprocedure. Dus dat heeft niks te maken met naturalisatie of opnieuw Nederlander worden. Het gaat eigenlijk om het rechtzetten van het verlies van Nederlanderschap. Er zijn al optieprocedures voor andere gronden als u het Nederlanderschap verloren hebt. Dit is een nieuwe procedure. En daar is nog heel weinig ervaring mee op dit moment. Het lijkt dat u zelf met documenten zult moeten aantonen wat de gevolgen zijn geweest voor u als u het Unieburgerschap heeft verloren. U kunt alle informatie over deze regeling terugvinden op de website van de IND. Alle links zullen ook gedeeld worden achteraf. En als u denkt dat u via deze optieregeling aanspraak kunt maken om het Nederlandschap terug te krijgen, dan kunt u een afspraak maken voor een optieverklaring bij de Nederlandse ambassade. Dat is het eventjes op basis van de nationaliteitswetgeving aanpassen.
Okay, thank you, Marije. I did have something on my list about pop-up embassies that you might want to talk about, but do let me know if that is something that you want to mention.
Dat komt straks nog eventjes bij other questions that will come forward.
Okay, all right. We already have some questions prepared, so that's good. That part will come about pop-up embassies will come later. So then I would like to switch to Chris Ben, the immigration lawyer that knows everything there is to know about the EU settlement scheme, the UK's EU settlement scheme. And he has kindly offered to explain more about it in this session and what you as an individual need to do to make sure that you have EU settled status or pre-settled status, or if you have pre-settled status, how to switch to settled status, etc. Chris, can I give you the floor, please?
Thank you very much, Koen, and thank you to the ambassador and to the Dutch Embassy for inviting me today, and I hope everyone enjoys their Kingsday celebrations. I'll try to be relatively quick and concise in this part. I've got a very sort of brief presentation that I'll run through just to kind of highlight some of the key aspects for updating, converting, upgrading, however you want to put it, from pre-settled to settled status, which is as Ambassador has already said, is going to be a key, very important stage for many people, and there are many people who've been granted pre-settled status, as much as there are also many people who've been granted settled status. So let me just, hopefully you can see my screen there, and I'll just flick through. As I say, this shouldn't take too long. So the first question for anyone with pre-settled status is, when do you need to apply for your settled status? When can you apply? When do you qualify, and so on? So the general rule, there's always other little sort of more niche rules, but I'm very much talking about the general rule that will apply to the vast majority of people, is that once you've completed a qualifying period in the UK of 5 years, you become eligible to make your application for settled status. And we would always encourage people to apply as soon as they qualify, because I'll come back to it later on in the session about why it's an advantage to have settled status. But essentially, think about it as 5 years. The simplest way I could put it is, if you arrived in May 2017 and you've been granted pre-settled status, you will be able to apply for settled status next month in May 2022, having completed 5 years residence in the UK, as long as you've been living here for those complete 5 years. People, when they're granted pre-settled status, will have been granted 5 years of status, and that's something to bear in mind. So the scheme actually didn't go live until the end of 2018. And so most people who were granted pre-settled status early on will have been granted it until at least 2023. If you were granted pre-settled status last week, you'll have been granted it until 2027. So it's always granted for 5 years. But you don't have to wait until you've done 5 years of pre-settled status, because the time is calculated from when you arrived in the UK. Okay, but that does lead to the kind of second important point about applying, which is, you must apply before the 5 years of pre-settled status expires. So you shouldn't go beyond that date of expiry, because then you would have to explain why you were making a late application and so on, and it becomes more complicated. So essentially, you have a window which is between, once you've lived in the UK for 5 years, that's when your window begins to apply for settled status, and that window stays open whilst you until the sort of expiry of your pre-settled status. So for some people that will be a long window, some people it'll be a short window. But as I say, the important point is to apply as quickly as you can once you've lived in the UK for 5 years. The application process is the same as what you will have been through for pre-settled status. So hopefully that will be a fairly straightforward process for people. It's the same thing where the Home Office wants you to provide them with your identity document, your passport, your national ID card. Ideally, you can scan it using the Home Office's phone scanning app. And then the form will look almost exactly the same, maybe a few sort of tweaks here and there, but it will ultimately be the same types of questions you were asked the first time around, and that will include asking for a national insurance number if you have one. The reason for the national insurance number is so the Home Office can check the national insurance records to see if they can get a picture of how long you've been living in the UK. Not everyone has a national insurance number, so it's not a problem if you don't have one, but if you do have one, it's very useful to provide it with the application. The system also asks you to upload some documents, which I'll come to in a second, because that might be necessary for some people to prove how long they've been living in the UK for those 5 years if their national insurance records don't show a complete picture. And essentially, the other important question that will come up when someone's applying for settled status is it will ask if you've been outside the UK for more than 6 months in one of your qualifying years or any of your qualifying years. And again, I'm going to come back to that section. I'll touch on that in a second. But I think the key sort of takeaway point is that you'll be doing a very similar application that you've already done because you've been granted pre-settled status, and all being well, it will be a fairly smooth process for everyone to upgrade. As I say, in terms of proving the how long you've been resident, because there is a big difference in being granted to apply for settled status. You have to show your 5 years, which is more. It obviously takes more evidence in some cases than it would have done to be granted pre-settled status, which didn't really take very much. You just had to show that you were living in the UK, even for a short period, by the end of December 2020. But when you're applying for settled status, you're being asked to show more, a longer period of residence. So as I say, if someone has been working for the last 5 years and has a national insurance number and they get PAYE taxed by their employer, the likelihood is that that person will show up on the Home Office, on HMRC records that the Home Office looks at, and that person will acknowledge that they've been living in the UK for 5 years, and they won't be asked to do anything else, just confirm that that's a correct representation of their situation. If you don't have a national insurance number, or if you've your national insurance number has been sort of active at some points but not active at other points, then the Home Office system will ask you to upload residency evidence to show that you've got 5 years of qualifying. And so the system allows you to upload scanned documents, and there is a Home Office sort of guidance list of types of documents for people to upload. It's on the gov.uk website. We can give that to people fairly easily. It's not a list of everything that will show residency. It's just a guide. If you have other things, it doesn't matter if they're not included on that list, because that you can put forward whatever evidence you have. But it says things like, if you've been paying council tax, that's useful to show that you've been resident in the UK. If you have sort of rental agreement or mortgage agreements that you're paying regularly, that will show evidence of residency. If you're a younger person, you've been in school or you've been in university, records of that. So there's a wide range of documents that someone could put forward. But the idea when you're applying for settled status is that you do have to show that you've been in the UK for 5 years, which, as I say, is more can be more of a challenge than obviously for that application for pre-settled status. What we would recommend to people is, even if you are not going to be applying for settled status for a couple of years down the line now, it's still good to start thinking about it, to make sure that you've got that evidence there that you'll need when you do come to apply, because it will just make life more straightforward for you whenever your time to apply comes. But as I say, the Home Office list, it's useful to look at the Home Office list because it gives you an idea of what evidence they like to see, but it's just a guide. So if you have other things, you can put forward other types of evidence. And the last thing I'm going to cover at this point is just to say that obviously when the system was designed, when the withdrawal agreement between the UK and the EU was agreed, no one had any idea that the COVID pandemic would hit us all so hard in 2020. And so there have been some adjustments to the way the Home Office approaches UK residents because of COVID-19. Because when we talk about people having 5 years of qualifying residence, the rule is that what that means is that you should be living in the UK for at least 6 months in every year. So if you've got 5 qualifying years, every year you're based in the UK for at least 6 months of those 6 months of that qualifying year. There was always one exception to that rule, which allowed people to have one longer absence that went up to 12 months. If, let's say, you were studying at university in the UK, but part of your course, you were able to go and study at an overseas university, you were allowed to do that as long as you didn't go over 12 months outside the UK. So you could have one longer absence if it's for an important reason, and studying was an important reason, or maybe your work might have posted you abroad for a sort of up to 12 months, and that would have been acceptable. So that's always been a rule that has been part of the scheme. So if you've had that longer absence, you will be asked about it in the application form, and you can give information about why you might have been away for the UK for a longer period. If the reason that you've been away was because of COVID, the Home Office has created a special guidance document for COVID absences because, as I say, it just wasn't there in the initial design of the system. And so I'm not going to be able to go through all that's written in the COVID guidance, but essentially what it says is if you're away for up to 12 months because of COVID, the Home Office will accept that. You would write in your application, well, I chose to go and spend time with my family, or I was wanted to go away from the UK. I had lots of infections, whatever it was that may have led you to be away because of COVID. So that's for absences up to 12 months. But there is also an allowance because COVID obviously has lasted for more than 12 months. So there is an allowance for people to be away for a longer period of time if it's connected to COVID, but it's a little bit more complicated. It might require a bit more justification when you're explaining your situation to the Home Office. So the guidance document is online, it's on gov.uk. It's worth looking at if that's your situation, so you can understand how the Home Office expects you to explain an absence that's related to COVID. But that's the last thing I really want to say about the sort of the important things about pre-settled status. Obviously, we might have some questions, but I'll hand back to Koen now. And thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Chris. Yes, I think that is all very clear. But if there are any questions, we'll get back to you. We have some questions that have already come in beforehand. Let's see. So yeah, I think it's good to explain. One of the questions that came in was, what are the benefits of settled status versus pre-settled status? Just clearly, what are the big benefits?
Yeah. So the most obvious benefit is that settled status is your confirmation of your right of permanent residency in the UK. So once you get settled status, there shouldn't be any more applications to the Home Office, and you have the right to live in the UK if you choose on a permanent basis. So that's the real key, because as we already talked about, pre-settled status is a 5-year temporary status, so it by definition ends, whereas settled status is as long as you want it to be, as long as you stick to a couple of main rules. The other advantages, there are some other advantages to this status, in that once you've acquired settled status, you can actually spend a lot longer outside the UK without losing your right to live here. So as I was saying a minute ago, whereas those people with pre-settled status are supposed to spend 6 months at least in the UK every year, once you've qualified for settled status, you can actually have, you can be away for up to 5 years without losing it. So if you decided that actually you wanted to spend some time abroad, or a number of years abroad, you would be able to do that without jeopardizing your settled status. You can always choose to come back to the UK in the future if that's what you want. So it gives you much greater flexibility. There are some kind of sort of little niche aspects to holding settled status that don't apply to pre-settled status, which is if you need to claim any sort of public supports from the Department of Work and Pensions, for example, DWP, it is easier to go through that application process for benefits with settled status than it is with pre-settled status. So you have your eligibility improves once you have settled status, and the same applies actually to student support. That if you decide, if you're young, if you're going to university and you want to apply for some kind of student finance to assist you through your studies, you have access to more student finance when you hold settled status than you would do when you hold pre-settled status. So all round, it's a sort of more beneficial status. But as I say, the key is it gives you your right to live here permanently, and you have much greater flexibility in terms of time spent away.
Yeah, that's very clear. And I think what was also clear, you said you can go away for up to 5 years. So I guess that there are ways you can still lose your settled status if you, for example, you go away for more than 5 years. Are there any other reasons why one could lose their settled status?
Yeah, exactly, and it's very important to remember that 5-year rule. Now, the withdrawal agreement wants to be very straightforward in this sense and say that people should not have lots of complicated rules to maintain their status, it should be very clear and very straightforward about how you maintain your right to live in the UK permanently. So as I say, the main rule, and the one that really is the key for everyone, is that 5 years. And when I talk about 5 years, what I mean is you would only lose it if you did not come back to the UK at all in 5 years. So if you chose to live outside the UK, but you came back to visit friends or just a temporary stay, at some point within those 5 years, it does reset the clock for you. So you can it's not just 5 years and then I have to come back and live here. It's more flexible than that. But the only other two bases, and I'm sure this isn't going to affect many people, but it's important to know that it does exist, is that if there's so criminal offending is something that can lead to settled status being taken away. That's the right of the Home Office to do that if someone commits offending that's serious. And if for some reason someone did obtain their settled status by making some sort of fraudulent claim, then of course it could be taken away on that basis. But really those two, I don't think are going to affect many people, thankfully. Really the only other thing that the main thing people need to bear in mind is that 5-year rule.
Okay. And you said as long as you come back to the UK, at least during a 5-year period, you will keep your status. Does that apply to if you're living somewhere else and you're just coming on a holiday, or do you actually have to settle here, pay council tax for a few months, and then how does that work?
Yeah, I think, I mean, this is one of those answers where we have to be, I guess, from as I'm a lawyer and I'm always looking for how can I maybe making things as clear as possible and what's the wording. But it seems to be very clear that that if the way that you would lose your settled status is to spend more than 5 years outside the UK. That's how it's written down. And so by definition, if you come back to the UK within those 5 years, even if it's for a temporary stay, then that means that you have not been outside the UK for 5 years, and therefore you don't lose your settled status. So the amount of time that you spend back in the UK to make sure you've not been away for more than 5 years, there's no reference to that in any of the agreement. It doesn't say, well, you have to come back for a year and then you can go again. It just says if you've not been away for 5 years, then you carry on with your settled your right to live permanently. So what that means, in answer to your question, is that someone could be living away from the UK and maintain their settled status on the basis that they visit the UK, even for a temporary period, at least once within those 5 years that they're away for, because it resets the clock for them and they can carry on living outside. So the idea is that it's very flexible in that sense.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think the next question I would like to ask is for Marije. It's a question from Wendy. If you have a Dutch parent living in the UK and the British nationality via your British parent, and you want to study in the UK at a UK university, can you keep dual citizenship under Dutch law?
Thank you, Koen. Yeah, if you were born after 31st of December 1984, and on the day of your birth, your mother was a Dutch citizen, you are a Dutch citizen by law, and it doesn't matter whether you were born in the Netherlands or abroad. Besides your Dutch nationality, you also have another nationality. For instance, when you're in the UK, you have also the nationality of your father. You will not lose your Dutch nationality unless you pass the 13-year term we just mentioned in the previous slides information. So if you have a dual nationality, both by birth, you will not lose the Dutch nationality unless you choose voluntarily to get another nationality, but there's new regulations. So the way the question was asked by Wendy, yes, you can keep your dual citizenship under Dutch law as long as you've had both nationalities through birth.
Okay, can I just ask a follow-up question on that? So even if you have the dual nationality by birth, can you still lose it after the now 13 years, the Dutch nationality?
Yes, if you have a dual nationality and you're living outside the European Union, outside the Netherlands, you can automatically use your Dutch nationality if you do not keep to the term of these, in this case, 13 years of stating that you still appreciate having the Dutch nationality. That means by reapplying for a Dutch passport or just putting it out in the statement that you have signed at an embassy.
Very clear. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think one more question also for Marije. I think this one is from Sam. I'm living in Aberdeen and traveling is difficult for me. Do I need to travel to London to renew my passport?
For a Dutch passport, you always have to apply in person because we need to be able to identify you and we need to be able to take your biometrics. So you have to apply in person. That can be done at the embassy in London, but also, as I stated before, at the external service providers, and they are located in London, Edinburgh, or Birmingham. And what we try to do a couple of times a year, we try to organize pop-up consular counters throughout the country. This week, in the beginning of this week, we were in Exeter, and we will organize more of those consular counter pop-ups throughout the years. We don't know when the next will be, and we have not decided on a location yet, but you will be able to find this information on our social media pages, and there you will also find the post to see if you are interested in such a pop-up counter, and then we can see where we can facilitate the most Dutch living abroad in England.
Okay. There's another nationality question, but I think that one might be better for Chris to answer. It's I am a Dutch national living in the UK and will be granted settled status in 2022. Will my child automatically have British citizenship?
Yes, thanks. It's a very good question. The rules on British citizenship for children are reasonably straightforward. In that, or in fact for anyone, is that you either are born British or you ask the Home Office to make you British. There's no situation where you might not, you were not born British, but at some point you become British at a later stage. There's only one scenario where that applies, but I won't be able to sort of cover that. So the main thing to think about is that if your children can be British if they're born in the UK, because the law says that when a child is born here, one of the parents is a settled person, and that includes either parent with settled status. When the child is born, that child is automatically a British national. So they're born British because their parent, one of them was settled here or both of them were settled here. As soon as the child is born outside the UK, it doesn't matter whether the parent is settled or not settled, the child isn't born British unless one of the parents is British. So for children born outside the UK, they're very rarely British if neither of the parents is. But if they're born in the UK, the thing to check is when my child was born, was either of the parents holding settled status? If the answer to that is yes, that child is born British and can get a British passport. If the answer is no, neither of the parents had settled status or were settled in the UK at the date the child was born, the child is not born British. And in these cases, the child will have to have an application made to the settlement scheme so that the child can be given status themselves. So it's all about when the child was born in the UK, was either of the parents settled? That's the first question you need to ask yourself.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. I have other questions related to the Brexit question as well, but not per se settled status. One of them, it comes from Pepijn. He says, I think this one is for Marije. Can I use my Dutch driver's license in the UK? And is it possible to apply for a British driver's license without losing my Dutch license?
Thank you, Koen. Yes, you still may drive in the UK on your Dutch driver's license, regardless if you are on holidays in the UK or if you live there. If you live in the UK, you can keep using your Dutch driver's license until you are 70 years old. You don't need to exchange your Dutch driver's license for a British license. If you would decide to change it to a British driver's license, you will lose your Dutch driver's license. So you can't keep both. So either one or the other.
I think that's actually new since Brexit, because when I changed my driver's license, I had to change, because this was before Brexit, I had to change to a UK driver's license. But I think now you can choose. Another question from Jeroen, also from Marije. Do I need any documentations or tests when traveling to the Netherlands from the UK?
That's a bit of a complicated question, Jeroen. It depends on your nationality. It depends on your vaccination status. So if you're traveling from the UK to the Netherlands at the moment does not consider the UK as a safe country at the moment. And since we're also not inside the EU or Schengen area, it is important that you can show your vaccination status when you travel to the Netherlands. If you can show your vaccination status, there's no other documentation you need to show than just that. If you are not fully vaccinated, you will need to show a test result, or you have to have a proof that you had COVID but already recuperated from it. It's no longer necessary to show health certificates when you fly from the UK to the Netherlands. So that is one thing that at least is gone, but the things you need to show are depending on the vaccination status, basically.
Okay, so that is all COVID related and Brexit related, visas for travel, those kinds of things. Anything about that?
That's a rather broad question as well. If you are a British citizen, you don't need a visa to travel to the Netherlands. But if you are a British citizen and you want to travel to the Netherlands at the moment, you will either need to show your vaccination status, and if you don't have it, then you need to show that there is a need to travel. So a British tourist at the moment is not fully vaccinated, cannot travel to the Netherlands without any documentation, even though it's not a visa. If you're a third country national, you're traveling from the UK to the Netherlands, that depends on your nationality if you need to have a visa or not.
Thank you very much. I have one more question for Chris also about switching from pre-settled to settled status. If you applied for settled status on one passport and you now have a new passport, what do you need to do to move your settled status to your pre-settled status to your settled status?
Yeah, so it depends on whether you are wanting to apply as soon as possible for settled status. So there's no problem with applying for settled status with a different document that you applied for pre-settled status, because obviously it's still you who's applying. But it does, the best way to make the system link you to your existing status would be to update your digital status. As you'll know, with your pre-settled status, you have a digital account with the Home Office, with UK Visas and Immigration. You can sign into it with the document you applied to the scheme with. And if you do that, if you sign into your account, you can update your account with your new passport once it's been issued. You can take a photograph of it and it should update it on, so your current passport will be the passport that's linked now to your account. So that's always a good idea to do anyway, because it helps you at the UK border. So it's always good to have your passport updated with your Home Office status account. If you do that before you apply for settled status, then when you come to apply for settled status, then the system will already link you to that pre-settled status, because that's what the current document passport is linked to. If you wanted to apply for settled status before and not worry about linking your new passport to your pre-settled status, you can still do that as well. It's just, it will probably ask you more questions, because it won't necessarily have seen you before, but it will ask you if you've already got pre-settled status. So you can do it either way. But as I say, it's always a good idea to have your account, your Home Office account, with whichever status, if you've got pre-settled or settled, it's always good to have that updated with your most recent passport or national identity card, because it helps you when you're traveling in and out of the UK, because it means that the border can automatically see your status.
Okay, Thank you. I have a question in the chat that is linked to this. So that is from Erica, and it says, "Could Chris please explain the consequences of an expired, I think an expired passport? Could Chris please explain the impact of your settled status if your Dutch passport status has expired?"
Yeah, it's a very simple question. A simple answer. It's a good question. It's a simple answer. Is that your settled status is not dependent on you having a valid passport. Your settled status belongs to you, and as long as you don't lose it in the ways that I talked about earlier, you have that settled status. So nothing about your passport expiring will affect your settled status, which is your right to live in the UK. But of course, traveling outside the UK is not possible, or re-entry to the UK is not possible if your passport has expired. So it's just about making sure that if you want to travel, that you've obviously got a new passport. And as I say, once you've got that new passport, it's a good idea to link it to your existing online account. You don't have to, it's not required of you, but it's a good idea to do it because it helps you cross the UK border. But if you decided you didn't want to travel, and at this point in time, you're not going to renew your Dutch passport, it's not going to affect your settled status, because that is your right and it belongs to you, and it's nothing to do with your passport as such.
Yeah, all right, clear. We have one question that came in before we started this session, and that is a question I would like to ask our ambassador, Karel. It's from Nadia, and she says, she refers to a court case that's going on, initiated by the IMA, and she says, "Why should I apply for settled status while there is a court case going on this?"
Yeah, that's a very valid question. First, when I talk to Dutch citizens, it's quite clear that many are not aware of what the IMA is. So let me first explain what the IMA is. It's the Independent Monitoring Authority. It's a UK body which has been installed under the Brexit agreement to make sure that the UK public bodies respect the rights of EU citizens living in the UK. Rights which were guaranteed under the withdrawal agreements. So that's the Independent Monitoring Authority. The IMA has started a legal proceeding against the Home Office on the issue we're discussing at the moment, that if you do not apply in time to convert your status from pre-settled to settled status, there will be a moment, as Chris just described, that you will lose all rights to remain in the UK. There's no safety valve at the end, so if you don't do it on time, you will lose your rights. What the IMA wants is to create a safety valve at the end, but it's not clear what the outcome of that court proceeding, of the legal proceeding will be, and therefore is basically the reason that we stress so much with all our fellow Dutch citizens. Make sure if you have pre-settled status, convert when you can. When you have your 5-year period, convert as soon as possible, so you will not get in that quagmire of losing all your rights. More in general, can I also say, Koen, at this moment, if you have the feeling that your rights under the withdrawal agreement, under the whole Brexit body of agreements between the EU and UK, if your rights are violated, make sure that you connect with the Independent Monitoring Authority. Just Google that name and you will have their details, because they get all the complaints together and they use them to talk with the Home Office. And it's a very efficient body which is quite influential here in the UK, and they need your concrete input if you have problems. Back to you, Koen.
Thank you very much, Karel. I think question-wise, I don't have any more questions here that have been sent in advance, I think. So maybe if there were questions in the Q&A that should still be answered, I'll ask my colleagues. Oh, someone just came in. Okay, let me just phrase this one. I'm not sure if this is a question that we've answered so far. Maybe it was answered in the Q&A. Dineke ten Hove says, do I have to give up my nationality if I want to get British nationality? And if so, why? Why is this not discriminatory? As I know there are exceptions if you are married to a British person. but maybe that one can be picked up in the Q&A. I think we have a good answer to that question online, and we can probably refer Tineke to that question. I think if there are no other questions in this session, I would like to just wish everyone a good King's Day today, and also as Karel already said, there will be a King's Day celebration in London this weekend on Saturday, starting at 1 o'clock in the afternoon until 6 o'clock, with all the Dutch beers and Dutch borrelnootjes and bitterballen and little games for the kids and all those things. And there is an auction indeed for the Koning Willem Fonds, and all the benefits that all the money that is raised through that auction will go to the Koning Willem Fonds. So it would be great if you are in the area in London to come to it's in and around the Dutch church in Austin Friars, to see you there. Many people from the embassy will also be there. The ambassador will be there. I think he will be speaking around 3 p.m. in the afternoon. We'll have a drink, oranje bittertje, I think. And then have a good day. And when you are in London, also don't forget to go to, for example, I work in the culture field, so I just want to pitch a few things. For example, to the Barbican Center, where they will have a new exhibition coming up. I think that one only opens on Monday. So maybe Camden Art Center is where you should go if you're in London on Saturday, because they will have a big exhibition by a Dutch artist there in Camden, close to Hampstead Heath. And the artist will open the exhibition on Friday, actually. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed this session. Thank you.